It is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer. Jonas, we are a week into March. We are still over a week away from March Madness. Why they push it back farther and farther into the month every year makes no sense to me. But we have our very own March Madness here on the Banner Ravens podcast. We are mere days away from the start of the legal tampering period in NFL free agency. And we have 32 NFL free agents that we think could end up in Baltimore. And our job today, Jones, is to determine which of them is most likely to be a Baltimore Raven. We've put them all into a bracket. How excited are you for this event? Am I Jim Nance? Do I have to say hello, friends? And who does that make you in this? Ian Eagle?
I think I'm Grant Hill, right?
You're Grant Hill, yeah, the color commentator,
Yeah,
right?
I'm part owner of the Orioles.
Yes, yeah. Local tie-in.
Well, you're Iron Eagle because you went to Syracuse, but you're also Jim Nance because you went to prep school, which I assume Jim Nance went to prep school.
I would assume, based on his attire and his number of quarter zips. Yeah, I am repping Syracuse because God knows they're not going to actually be in the real tournament. This is the closest that they are going to get. Jonas, this is going to be a fun exercise today. And the explanation for this bracket is essentially this is an idea that I've stolen from other podcasts, but we are attempting to predict who the Ravens will sign. This is not going to be who we would sign if we were Eric DeCosta. This is just the most likely outcome for the Ravens in free agency. Now, I've seeded all of the players 1 through 8 based on the logical fit in my mind. Jonas might disagree, and we'll get into all of that. So I have 32 players broken down into 4 quote-unquote regions. The 4 regions are running back, edge rusher, offensive line, which includes guards and tackles, not centers, and in-house, which is all positions, which is including the 20-some in-house free agents that the Ravens could bring back. And the tiebreaker between Jonas and I is going to be the flip of a coin. So a lot will ride on the flip of just one coin. But Jonas, are you and an app, I should say, for a coin flip that hopefully will work for us. Jonas, are you ready to unveil the bracket and begin to dissect the matchups?
Are we going to take an hour like it does with the freaking selection committee?
Yeah.
We're going to head to commercial break after every 8-team reveal.
I always wonder about the teams that had the camera on them for Selection Sunday that don't get picked, and what happens to that footage of them just sadly walking away and realizing that they're not going to make the tournament.
I don't think Maryland or Syracuse have to worry about that this year, unfortunately.
Yeah. We'll do just like Maryland and Syracuse, we'll do an NIT after this too, that will include Chase Young. As somebody pointed out that we don't have Chase Young on our board. All right, let's reveal.
They're both too expensive and too cheap to make this
exactly.
roster.
Yeah. So again, this is not just the 32 best free agents, as you can tell from my Photoshop file here. This is the 32 most likely free agents that we have. So running back, edge rusher, offensive line, and in-house. And we are going to try to predict a winner here today. Jonas, let's start in the top left region with running back. And let's break down this 1-8 matchup that we have. The 1 seed is Tony Pollard. You gave him some love on the last podcast, talking about how he could fit for the Ravens. Cowboys running back. He's going to be 27 years old, going up against Antonio Gibson, another young guy, 26 years old, Washington running back, a productive one, but a fumble machine in Antonio Gibson. Who do you like in this 1-8 matchup? And could we see a potential UMBC upset of Antonio Gibson over Tony Pollard?
No, I think let's stick with the chalk here. I think it's got to be Pollard. If for no other reason than the fact that he is a proven runner, whereas Antonio Gibson is more of a proven receiver. And in this Ravens offense, we don't know yet. Maybe Lamar is evolving into a point where running backs, and Todd Monken as well, are evolving to a point where running backs are more featured in the passing game. But I just do not think that, with everything considered for what this offense needs, which is to say a proven veteran runner, you can pick Gibson over Pollard in this particular circumstance.
Yeah, so the projected contracts, according to PFF, for these guys, Pollard, 3 years, 6.67 million average annual value. 3 years would be a lot for a running back. But, if the Ravens determine it's a good fit, maybe they'll do it. And then Antonio Gibson projected to get 1 year, $3.6 million. So Tony Pollard moves on to our Sweet 16. Next up, the 4-5 matchup, Jonas. Jerick McKinnon, 32 years old, Kansas City running back, against Josh Jacobs, just 26 years old, for the Las Vegas Raiders. Who do you like in this close matchup here?
You know, I know there's a lot of love for Josh Jacobs. It's a little bit surprising to see him considered on that tier one of free agent running backs with Saquon Barkley, just because I think that 2022 season is doing a lot of work for him in captivating some folks and convincing
Yeah.
them that he could be a legitimate top 10 running back. And to his credit, he was an all pro that year. But, you look at the stats, a lot of that success was just him running behind a good enough offensive line into light box after light box because defenses were just scared shitless about leaving one safety back there to deal with Devontae Adams. That was the year where teams just shaded the heck out of the ball to Devontae Adams, which meant that Josh Jacobs had like the most runs into light boxes of any back that year. This year, the the light box frequency cut back, and he was also way less effective against them. So you put all that together, you talk about the Ravens paying what, like $9-10 million a year for Josh Jacobs. The PFF
Yeah. $11
valuation
million
is what,
dollars a year for 3 years.
$11 million. I just don't see it. And Jeff McKinnon, not much of a terrific run threat, but he is a good pass blocker. That was when he was healthy in Kansas City, which was not all that often this
Yeah.
past year. That was where he kind of made his bones. We know Justice Hill has that reputation, but still, there is at least some credibility to the theory that the Ravens did not really like what they saw from their pass blockers at that running back spot in the playoffs. So why not invest a little bit of chunk change in a guy like McKinnon?
Yeah, Jacobs, that one season that you mentioned, 2022, 1,600 rushing yards, and then kind of crashed and burned like that whole Raiders team did in 2023 this past year. His yards per carry went down to like 3.5. You know how many receiving touchdowns Josh Jacobs has in his entire career? Goose egg.
Telling.
0. That is mind boggling for a guy who's been in the league for 5 years and has been very productive. Part of that could be coaching and the play design, but these are two very different running backs because Jerick McKinnon last year caught 2 passes in the Super Bowl and had 4 receiving touchdowns last season, despite not being very healthy. So these are very different running backs. I would probably lean towards Jerick McKinnon here just because he's going to be cheaper, because he's a little bit older and a little bit less healthy. He has less name brand value than Josh Jacobs does. And Jacobs's past season did not give you much reason to believe that he is going to return to that 2022 self. He could have another good season if he signs behind with a team with a good offensive line, but I'm going to go McKinnon here. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
All right. All right. By the way, just a reminder, we have Gus Edwards in our in-house region. So that's the reason that he is not
And
in
J.K.
this running
Dobbins
back.
too.
And J.K. Dobbins. That's the reason he's not in this. So both those guys could still advance. They're just not in this running backs region. All right. A.J. Dillon, the 3 seed, against Saquon Barkley, the 6 seed. Jonas, we had to throw Saquon in here just because of the perceived fit between Barkley and the Ravens. But I think you and I are both in agreement that it makes more sense to the pundits than it does to the team.
Yeah, he has been an efficient runner these past 2 years. That was a little bit surprising to me. I think it just is him and Isaiah Pacheco in Kansas City who had like, over 0.4 rush yards per expected per carry, which is a really, really good company to be in. But if you're paying all that money for a guy like Saquon, $12 million a year potentially, I think it might come down a little bit just because of how inflated this running back market or how crowded this running back market is. You want to make sure that like there is some explosiveness to him, and he just has not been, despite who he is physically, all the attributes that he has athletically, has not been an explosive runner, which is kind of
Yeah.
surprising to dig into the stats and figure that out. He's not a great route runner. You look at the PFF grades, despite him having some of those incredible catch and runs. He just doesn't seem to get as open as a Christian McCaffrey might, for instance. So I think if you're going to, make a value play for this one, it's AJ Dillon, who at this point might be like a very poor man's Gus Edwards, but also might be, just a victim of a bad fit in Green Bay last year. So I think if you're paying him just $3 million a year, you're replacing that short yardage goal line ability. You're getting a guy who, maybe over the course of the season can wear down defenses just because of his size and his heft and his physicality. I think AJ in this spot, even though he's far from the player that Saquon is, probably makes sense in this case.
Yeah, Saquon, you mentioned far from the player. I mean, Saquon last year, like you said, the PFF grades were not great. PFF had him as just the number 35 running back. And I know that doesn't tell the full story, but Saquon was taken second overall for a reason. He has those incredible physical attributes. And aside from those 2 Pro Bowl seasons, it feels like he has been a little bit hit or miss. And for $12 million a year for 3 years, which is what PFF is projecting he's going to get, I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze for a team that is this desperate for cap space. And Saquon Barkley in that Ravens backfield, sure, would look great running alongside Lamar Jackson. But AJ Dillon, who has never topped 800, who's only topped 800 rushing yards in a season once in his career, I think would be a much, would cost a lot less and could still provide you some value. So the 3 seed, AJ Dillon moves on. Sorry, people who wanted Saquon Barkley to end up in
Our
Ravens purple.
our audience just got cut in half.
I know. There is one other guy that I think a lot of Ravens fans would like to see in Baltimore, and that would be Derrick Henry. He's our number 7 seed. He's going up against Dante Foreman, my guy that I pumped on our last podcast, Bears running back. Derrick Henry, 30 years old. Boy, he has a lot of tread on those tires. He's led the league in carries 4 of the last 5 years, but to his credit, he is still very effective. PFF had him as the number 3 running back in all of football last year, projected to get 2 years with a $9 million average. Dante Foreman, who signed a 1 year, $2 million deal last year with the Bears, he's projected to get 1 year, $3 million. The Bears kind of went away from him in favor of Khalil Herbert at the end of last year. It's another value play if you're going with Dante Foreman over Derrick Henry. Sure, Derrick Henry is like a supersized version of Gus Edwards, but again, are the Ravens willing to give this much money to a running back and somebody who is already 30 years old?
I think they might be.
Really?
It's a little bit apples and oranges because he was already under contract last year, but there were the reports that the Ravens were close to trading for Derrick Henry.
True.
Um, we don't know how much Derrick Henry might get in free agency. He's obviously, it's been established by the insiders around the NFL that he is on that tier 2. And if you're paying, like, let's say it's not $9 million a year, let's say it's like, I don't know, $7.5, $8 million a year, and you can drop that first year cap hit to like 5 or 6 million, just kind of backload it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, wouldn't that be appetizing for Eric DeCosta, for John Harbaugh, for Lamar Jackson, just to have that nightmare fuel backfield? And I don't know. I mean, like, I think there is a lot of due hesitation about like how he would fit in an offense like the Ravens, which uses shotgun and pistol as much as they do. But you look
Yeah.
at what Derrick Henry did these past 2 years, it was a lot more shotgun than he'd pretty much ever done in Tennessee, and his rushing averages were good. I think it was like total over 5 yards per carry. So, Taylor Lewan, former Titans lineman, saying that he doesn't really like zone reads, doesn't really like RPOs. I don't know if there's an offense that he could go to that's like credibly good that doesn't have those kind of elements into their game. So I feel like this might be a coin flip situation, Paulie, if you're on Dante Foreman Island.
I am on Dante Foreman Ireland. I can't go off my guy. I think you got to flip the coin on the app.
All right. So do you heads or tails?
I pick heads.
Oh boy.
Really should have tested this out. What is it?
Tails.
It's tails.
El
Derrick
Spectre
Henry.
Cito is moving on.
There's our first Cinderella upset of the first round. Going to commercial break. Wow. Derrick Henry as the 7 seed moves on in the running back region, and we have 4 running backs remaining now in that region. All right, Jonas, let's move on to the edge rusher region, where we have the 1 seed, Emmanuel Agba, going up against the 8 seed in Leonard Floyd. Now, why are we picking edge rusher as its own category? That's because the Ravens could be losing roughly 20 sacks between Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy. Both those guys are going to be in the in-house region. They're not in this region. But the Ravens, could certainly use some juice from around the edge, even though they have their up the middle guy in Justin Madubuike tagged. They still need a little bit of juice, some support for Odafe Owe. They need an insurance policy for David Ojabo. They could go with a defensive lineman in round 1, but they could also sign somebody here. Now, the reason I have Emmanuel Agba as my 1 seed, Jonas, is because he's productive. He just got cut by Miami, which means he wouldn't factor into the comp pick formula. Also means that the Ravens could go out and sign him right now because he does not have to wait until the start of free agency because he was released. So he's going up against the number 8 seed, 32-year-old Leonard Floyd from Buffalo. Who do you like here?
Yeah, we don't really have a PFF or a spot track projection for some of these guys, which means they're going to come cheap. And Emmanuel Agba is one of those guys. He's not one of the top 200 free agents on Brad Spielberger's PFF list. So yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to go with Agba. He's on the wrong side of 30, which makes him the perfect Ravens edge rusher free agency possibility, just because they like getting those guys with good pedigree, with a good production, with not a whole lot of money. 5 sacks last year, a solid 13.3 QB pressure rate for Emmanuel Agba. So even though Leonard Floyd has that experience of working with Chuck Smith, and that's going to be a mantra that you'll hear throughout this region is that experience with Chuck Smith. I just think that because of the comp pick considerations, because of the fact that he has been moderately successful over these past couple of years, we should put him through.
Yeah, 5 sacks last year, 13.3 QB pressure rate for Emmanuel Agba. Leonard Floyd is interesting because, like Jadeveon Clowney, he waited a while to sign last summer. It wasn't until the first week of June that he went and signed a 1-year, $7 million deal with the Buffalo Bills and went on to have 10.5 sacks. So a very similar style to Jadeveon Clowney, the way that Leonard Floyd went in free agency last year. And maybe he'll do the same. And maybe come June, July, if he's not signed, the Ravens will try to make a play for him. All right, 4-5. We have Derek Barnett and Danico Autry. Barnett is an interesting case. Former first-round pick, was with the Eagles this past year and then ended up on the Houston Texans. Didn't have a sack in his first 8 games with the Eagles, then had 2.5 in just 6 games with the Texans last year. Danico Autry, a lot older, 34. He is going to be in 2024. Pretty good sack rate and had 11.5 sacks this past year with the Titans. Who do you like in this matchup of guys who are probably going to sign 1-year deals?
Yeah, this is a real tough one. These teams are right next to, or these guys are right next to each other in our
It's a
Ken
4-5.
Palm
It's like
rankings.
the 8-9.
Yeah. I don't know. On the one hand, you like the age factor of Derek Barnett of being 28. You don't love the just ghosting appearance that he had with the Eagles in that first half, but you like how he bounced back in the back half of that season with the Texans. Autry, I think for me it's just the age. I'm not really in love with the idea of paying a 34-year-old, $7 or $8 million a year. So even though it was only a solid enough half year performance from Derek Barnett, I think it's probably worth it. He's a former first round pick, another guy who's worked with Chuck Smith. So if you can get him for, the PFF projection is $5 million a year for that 1-year deal, maybe you spread out that cap hit with a couple of void years. I think it probably makes sense for me.
So you're going with Barnett here?
Yep.
I'm fine with that. I'm not even going to argue that one. I'm totally tossed up between Barnett and Autry there. A 3-6 matchup in the edge rusher region. 3 seed Andrew Van Ginkel from Miami. He's going to be 29. He finished the year on injured reserve after he got hurt in the regular season finale. He's projected to get 2 years, $6.5 million average annual value. And then the 6th seed in Marcus Davenport. Last year with Minnesota, another guy who suffered from injuries, limited to just 4 games last year with a high ankle sprain. He's projected to get 1 year, $5 million, and he's going to be 28 years old. Davenport against Van Ginkel. Who do you like?
I think Van Ginkel is going to be my Cinderella story for this. Not really Cinderella because he's the 3 seed, but he's going to be
Yeah,
the Butler basketball, the high overachieving mid major. He was really really good toward the end of last year. He finished the year with 6 sacks, 17.7% QB pressure rate, which is really, really good. But just looking at some true media stuff from the end of the year, the back half of last year, he was like had one of the highest pressure rates in the NFL for an edge rusher. It's close to 20%. If you look at I think the true media PFF data. So I guess there's a little bit of concern with that foot injury, but I don't think it's supposed to be super major. You also throw in the fact that he can play off ball linebacker. So he gives you that versatility where you can, give Coach Orr more flexibility in just how he presents defenses to the opponent, to the quarterback. So if you can get away with paying him $6 or $7 million a year, a guy who's only 29, coming off what was probably the best year of his career, I think there could be a lot of value in what he could bring to this Ravens defense and just how they like to get very exotic and fast and just confusing for all their opponents.
I agree. Andrew Van Ginkel is my pick here, which means that we have yet to have an upset in the edge rusher region, but that could change here as we have the 2-7 matchup between the 2 seed Shaquille Barrett and the 7 seed Dante Fowler. Now, Barrett, 2-time Pro Bowler, was released by the Bucks this offseason, which means he, again, wouldn't count against the comp pick formula. That's a huge point in his favor. Had 4.5 sacks last year. The second straight season, though, where he had a declining QB pressure rate. He had the lowest of his career last year. He's 32 years old. Another older guy in Dante Fowler spent the last couple years with the Dallas Cowboys, close to a 20% QB pressure rate and had 4 sacks last year. Who do you like between Barrett and Fowler?
I think the most important detail overlooked in the Bear thing is that he's a Baltimore guy, Baltimore native. So could be a homecoming there. Another guy with the Chuck Smith connection. Chuck Smith, according to the good ESPN feature from a couple years ago, taught him the cross chop move in 2018. Next season, he went for 19 and a half sacks. So I'm sure
Was
they were
that the cross chop
at
move?
comfort level.
Did I just do it?
What's up?
Did I just do
Yeah.
the cross chop move? Okay.
And if you want to talk about just the possibility of a bounce back year, obviously him being 32 makes this a little bit of a moving target, but he was coming back last year from a torn Achilles tendon, so you're hopeful that the year after would be the year where he could have a more reasonable season, have more than the 4.5 sacks that he did last year. Put all that together again with the fact that he was released, so there are those comp pick considerations. I'm inclined to go with Shaq Barrett and bring the Baltimore guy home.
I am as well. All right, so Shaq Barrett moves on. No upsets so far in the first few matchups of the edge rusher region. Manuel Agba, Derek Barnett, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Shaq Barrett all move on there. Let's go up top right to our offensive line region. Now, the reason that we have offensive line as its own category here, both John Simpson and Kevin Zeitler are free agents, scheduled to be free agents. So they could be losing their 2 starting guards. They could technically, in the next couple days or later on in the offseason, release one of their tackles, Morgan Moses or Ronnie Stanley. We both think it's unlikely that those guys get released, but maybe there's a restructure in the works for Ronnie Stanley. So a lot of questions on the offensive line. Obviously, Tyler Linderbaum is set at center, so we didn't look at any centers for this, but we looked at a lot of guards and a couple tackles here. First matchup we have, Jonas, the number 1 seed, Greg Van Roten. I love this player and this fit for the Ravens. That's why he's my 1 seed here. Vegas Raiders. He's 34 years old. PFF had him as the number 7 guard last year. He was very solid, and he's only projected to get a 1-year deal because of his age. And then the 8th seed is John Runyon Jr. From Green Bay. He was the PFF's number 47 guard. He allowed 2 sacks at right guard last year. He is the son of 14-year NFL vet John Runyon Sr., and he is a St. Joe's Prep alum, which is always a point in his favor. PFF is projecting him to get a 3-year, $20 million deal. 1 versus the 8, Van Roten versus Runyon. Who do you like here, Jonas?
Yeah, I'm not going to fight you on GVR, so let's just put him through. I don't
I
think we're
mean,
going to spend a whole lot of time talking about offensive linemen here.
offensive line. Yeah, I mean, you could have talked more about John Runyon going to St. Joe's Prep, same school as Marvin Harrison Jr. That's okay. All right, the next matchup here, we got the 4-5 matchup. That would be the 4 in Jonah Jackson of the Detroit Lions, going to be 27 this year. He's projected to get a lot of money. 3 years, $30 million. That would be $16.75 million guaranteed, according to PFF. He allowed 2 sacks at left guard last year against Laken Tomlinson, 9-year vet, and he hasn't missed a start in 6 years. He's played for 3 teams over the course of that time, and he signed a 3-year, $40 million deal from the Jets. And he also was another guy who got released, so he would not count against the comp pick formula. Jonas, Laken Tomlinson, Jonah Jackson. Who do you like?
I don't like either of these guys, to be honest. I guess just put Jonah Jackson through because he's actually a quality pass blocker. I mean, I think the fact that Laken Tomlinson allowed 7 sacks at guard last year is
Yeesh.
a big red flag. You
Yeah,
don't know
that
how
whole
much of that
Jets
is just
offensive line.
the overall
Yeah.
the overall dysfunction with the Jets there. But I don't think the Ravens are in the market for a $10 million a year guard. But let's just put Jonah Jackson through.
All right, 3-6 matchup. I could tell your disdain for this region here, Jonas. Just dripping in your voice. Graham Glasgow, 31 years old with the Detroit Lions. PFF is projecting he's going to get 2 years, $6.5 million. He allowed just 2 sacks and 39 pressures last year against offensive tackle. So our first tackle here, Donovan Smith, 30 years old with the Kansas City Chiefs, projected to get 1 year's and $2.5 million. But he is a local guy, Jonas. He has that edge to him.
Yeah, Owens Mills High School. Did not grow up in Baltimore, but I think he transferred to the Baltimore area when he was a sophomore, I believe. I was reading on Wikipedia last night. I feel like I don't know if Donovan Smith is at a point in his career where he can really be saved by anyone. Obviously, if he went into Kansas City and that great coaching staff and couldn't really have that career turned around, kind of disappointing. I think he was called for 8 holding penalties last year, which was tied
Yeesh.
for the most in the NFL, tied with John Simpson, unfortunately for John Simpson. I know he only allowed a couple sacks, but not a great run blocker. I guess if we're putting someone through, might as well just put the more quality option and the guy at the spot where the need is more immediate. So for me, it's Graham Glasgow moving through.
Do you think that there's a possibility that should the Ravens try to move on from Patrick McCary this offseason, that they would try to get a swing tackle as a backup in free agency behind both Morgan Moses and Ronnie Stanley?
Yeah, that's a good notion. I guess I would say, and maybe you don't know this, but does Donovan Smith have experience just at left tackle, or is it at right tackle as well?
That's a terrific question. I haven't the foggiest.
It,
You're
it
asking way
looks
too
like,
many questions
according
about
to
the
PFF,
offense.
it's according to PFF, it's 9,000 snaps at left tackle and 0 at right tackle. So I don't think
Good to know.
he's not our Huckabee.
Or swing tackle. All right. Well, it was a good notion. All right. The 2 against the 7 here, Jonas. John Feliciano, another older guy like Greg Van Roten, who could get just a 1-year deal, even though he's still very productive. He's going to be 32 this year. PFF had him as the number 5 guard in all of football for the San Francisco 49ers. Projected to get 1 year, $2 million, according to PFF. Did not allow a single sack against the number 7. Andrews Pete, an interesting case because he spent a lot of time in his career at guard, but last year was moved back to tackle pretty much full time for the first time since 2016. He's going to be 31 this next season. I don't know where the Ravens would want him to play, but maybe theoretically he has tackle guard versatility, which could be useful for a team that is, maybe set to lose players at both of those spots. But I still like John Feliciano over Andrews Pete.
Yeah, me too. The fact that he got equal time at left and right guard last year, basically. I don't know if those were in the course of him pulling backup duty or making starts, but just the fact that he has that versatility is a good sign for me. You do wonder a little bit about just the production of leaving the kind of magic pixie dream dust of the Shanahan system for literally anywhere else. But I don't know. I mean, I think the fact that PFF rated him as highly as they did is probably a pretty good sign, and the fact that there were no sacks allowed kind of speaks for itself.
All right. So we have concluded the first round for our offensive line region. Let's move down to our final region here, Jonas. That would be the in-house guys. So this is guys from all positions. Jonas, you said, what did you write here in the notes about the World Cup?
That bring it up.
I don't know anything about soccer.
This is like this is like if CONCACAF got its own side of the bracket in the World Cup, because I don't think any of these guys relative to the rest of the folks coming out of the regions are all that realistic candidates to be re-signed. Although we shall see. We shall see. Maybe
We shall see.
maybe Jadeveon Clowney is like the United States catching fire in a particular World Cup. That hasn't happened. Maybe it'll be Kyle Van Noy. I just think that like the guys who, if this were a 16 seed bracket and we were including the more high profile guys like Malik Harrison, Delshon Phillips, Darryl Worley, Ronald Darby, they would be the ones who would probably be breaking through. But we're at a particular price point for this region, so it's the more high profile guys. So I think that makes it more. It makes it less likely that they will be signed.
All right. We have 1 through 8 seeded. I did not include, we had to bump Tyler Huntley out of this, which I think is a whole fascinating other conversation, because I think Tyler Huntley is in his own kind of category, because is he good enough to be like a bridge quarterback this offseason for a team like Denver that is going to draft a rookie probably? Uh, I don't think he's quite that good. He might just be like a high price backup for a team. But then are you talking about like a Jacoby Brissett type contract for him? In which case he might make sense to return to the Ravens, even though they could just draft another guy or go with another undrafted free agent like Tyler Huntley himself was. But I don't know. I think there is a better case that Tyler Huntley returns than maybe you're giving it, Jonas.
Yeah, the biggest argument for Tyler Huntley coming back is that when you turn on the film of Malik Cunningham from last year, it is just 4 snaps of him running routes as a wide receiver.
Fair enough. All right. The 1 versus 8 seed in the in-house region, Jonas. OBJ is my number 1 seed because of what we heard from Eric DeCosta and from John Harbaugh at the combine about how they're crossing their fingers and their toes, hoping that OBJ will return to Baltimore. He's going to be 32 next year. PFF had him as the number 32 wide receiver. He had 565 receiving yards last year. They liked his veteran presence, but is he going to be worth the 1 year projected $7 million that PFF is saying he could get? And the 8 seed is Patrick Queen, who's going to get a whole lot more money than that. 4 years, $18 million average, according to PFF, is what he's projected to get. Had a Pro Bowl season last year. To me, I don't love either of these guys because OBJ, yes, he may be less rusty next year than he was this past year because of the time off before the 2023 season, but is he going to be better when he's 32? And for Patrick Queen, you just cannot. I know even for a team that loves its linebackers as much as the Ravens do, you just can't be paying 2 inside linebackers, like a combined $180 million. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, this is not me believing in Duke. This is me not believing in Morgan State. And Patrick Queen, unfortunately, in this case, is Morgan State. So let's
Wow.
let's move on. Let's move on. OBJ.
We've seen some interesting upsets though, with Duke falling as like a 2 seed to a 15. You never know. Maybe it'll happen in the next round. OBJ moves on. All right, the 4-5 here. Kyle Van Noy, very productive season for the Ravens this past year, but he's going to be 33. He had 9 sacks, and PFF is only projecting him to get about $3.3 million in free agency. That would be doable. And then the 5 seed is Gus Edwards, who is projected to get 2 years, 3.75 million, average, according to PFF. This is a buyer's market at running back, Jonas, with some of the names that we just rattled off in the running back region with Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs. Maybe if the market just gets to the point where nobody is paying running backs, Gus Edwards could find his way back to Baltimore. What do you think?
Yeah, it's possible, but I think at that point the Ravens will probably have already moved on a running back and locked him up. So I think if the projection of $3.5 million for Kyle Van Noy is accurate, then that is a really really good bargain for a guy who had like the second fastest get off time of his career last year, who had like who QB pressure rate jumped by like 50% over 2022, who did all this while not having a training camp to get in the shape of his life. So I think even though he is 33, even though he does have some deficiencies, I don't especially love him as a run defender. I just think that considering the Ravens' needs at edge rusher and the fact that you can get a pretty good running back in the draft, I think Kyle Van Noy for me is the choice to move on.
I agree. I think it's a little close, and I'm not so sure Kyle Van Noy advances beyond this, but I have Kyle Van Noy moving on as well. 3 versus the 6, Jonas. Jadeveon Clowney, another productive veteran on the edge for the Ravens this past year, had 9.5 sacks in his age 30 season. Uh, Actually had fun in Baltimore, according to what we've heard. And then J.K. Dobbins is the 6 seed. Did not have fun in Baltimore, I think you could say, after spending several years here. Who do you like to advance between Clowney and Dobbins?
Yeah, I like Clowney. I don't think he's going to return to Baltimore just because, uh, you know, you can enjoy your time in a city for a team, but still at the end of the day resort to a kind of business as business approach. Not to
Yeah.
suggest that Jadeveon Clowney is mercenary in how he goes about playing for teams, but he's got a family to provide for, and he wants to be paid what he's valued. And what he was this past year was one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. Full stop. Even though he didn't get double-digit sacks, his pressure rate was absurd. His QB pressures was absurd. So I think the fact that you measure all that against the fact that J.K., even though, man, whenever I do some research on J.K. and his career, it just gets sadder and sadder because there was truly no one like him when he was healthy, and a lot of that, of course,
Yeah.
had to do with him being on the field at the same time as Lamar Jackson, and just having that nice little setup. But still, you think back to the 2022 season when Lamar was hurt, and it was pretty much a J.K. fueled offense with Tyler Huntley, and that team might not have gone to the playoffs if it weren't for J.K. just put on escape a couple times. But considering all the kind of acrimonious feelings between J.K. and the Ravens, not just that quasi holdout last year, but him bashing Greg Roman after that Bengals playoff loss, him insinuating several times during that 2022 season that there were people in the Ravens front office who did not want him to get that scope. I think the Ravens are able to put some of those feelings, some of those hard feelings in the background, put them in the rearview mirror. But I just think that in this particular head-to-head matchup, it's probably more likely that Clowney goes through.
Yeah, it is sad to watch, to go back and watch J.K. Dobbins highlights because of just how explosive he was. And we said it the first half of the week 1 game. You just saw you got a glimmer of how good this offense could be with the healthy J.K. Dobbins before it was cruelly snatched away from everybody, and it was painful. And maybe the Ravens have that again in Keaton Mitchell, and they'll get to experience it in the second half of this coming season and years to come, or maybe they'll find it again in a mid-round running back. But I don't think it's coming from J.K. Dobbins. Jadeveon Clowney moves on. Finally, the 2 seed Kevin Zeitler against the 7 seed Geno Stone. I don't think either of these guys is likely to return to Baltimore. I just think Geno Stone is going to get paid to be a starting safety by somebody. And I think it's an interesting thought experiment to think about. Would you rather have Geno Stone or Marcus Williams? But it doesn't matter because Marcus Williams is under contract and Geno Stone isn't. But what do you think, Jonas? If all things were equal in a vacuum, would you rather just trade Geno Stone and have him as your starting safety next to Kyle Hamilton as opposed to Marcus Williams?
No, I think I'd want Marcus Williams just because of the range that he has. I mean, like, it there was a good story from our colleague Giannahan just talking to Gino, and he's kind of reviewing all of his interceptions. And to his credit, he made those interceptions, but a lot of them were just him being right place, right time.
He's a very
Him
smart safety. Like doesn't have insane athleticism, but he's in the right place at the right time.
right, right. But there is a certain amount of luck with interceptions. That's
True.
why it fluctuates from team for from year to year for team for players. So I guess I would say in this particular matchup, I would probably say that like the seeds are like they should be not flipped, but closer together because what we've seen from this free agency market is a lot of safeties being shed, a lot of safety contracts being shed. And that's going to make it tough for Geno Stone to get the kind of deal that maybe PFF is projecting for him, which is 2 years, $6.5 million per year. So I don't think that means that Geno Stone is going to come back to Baltimore, but I do think it makes it more likely in this situation of unlikelihoods that Geno would come back just because I think with as many safeties crowding the market as there are right now relative to how
Yeah.
few Pro Bowl guards there are, I think for me, it would be Geno coming back.
Really? So you have Geno Stone over Kevin Zeitler?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if they would have
Wow.
paid Butler already, they would have done that. They would have locked him up before that void year situation got incurred on
Jonas,
our cap.
flip that stinking coin. I want Kevin Zeitler here.
All right,
Open
let's
that
see it.
app.
What you
Hopefully it's
got?
not.
Call it.
I'm gonna call heads again. Raise your phone there, Jonas.
Tails.
Tails again. Geno Stone. He's gonna get paid. I just think he's gonna get paid by somebody. All right. It just doesn't. Why would he return to a place where he's going to be the backup? Who knows? All right.
He's
Uh,
he's not returning here either way.
yeah, no, neither of those guys are. All right. That concludes the first round. That was just the first round, Jonas. I think it'll go a lot faster now that we know who all these guys are.
For sure.
We have the Sweet 16. Let's go back up top to the running back region. By the way, thank you so much if you're tuning in live on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up. If you're listening to it after the fact, go back and watch it because it is a fun visual experience. You see less of our faces and more of the bracket. Give us a nice review as well. We'll read it out here on the podcast. One of our commenters, Keith, saying Jonas is a big Duke guy. So Jonas, I'm sorry, you've cemented your reputation. It's too late. All right.
Did he not see my tweet from like literally 45 minutes ago where I posted the classic Duke crying child? I hate Duke.
Yeah, no.
F Duke.
Yeah, that was a great tweet though.
Duke is an Athens to me.
Jonas, we're not all just following your tweets, okay? We're not just all refreshing your feed. Sorry. Let's go
Tony
with
Pollard.
Tony Pollard.
Pollard through.
Tony Pollard, the 1 seed, against Jerick McKinnon, the 4 seed. Tony Pollard makes a lot of sense to me here, Jonas. He is your guy. You have rubber stamped him on the BaltimoreBanner.com. I feel like you've thrown your weight behind him. Jerick McKinnon is too much of a question mark. 32 years old, missed too much time. He doesn't do. He's not on the field enough for the Ravens to trust him to be out there to be their RB 1.5 or 2.5. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's closer to an RB3 at this point, and
yeah,
the Ravens are in the market for RB1, 1.5. So I think it's Pollard.
Yeah, I think Justice Hill already fills that RB3 if they need it. All right, next up, AJ Dillon against Derrick Henry. AJ Dillon, the 3. Derrick Henry, our Cinderella so far. Does the Cinderella run end here, or does it continue on? Where is Sister Jean? We have no idea. Who do you have?
Give me Henry.
All right, all right. Do I fight it again? Do I go with AJ Dillon again, or do I surrender to the Cinderella?
I just feel like if you're thinking about it, big picture, wouldn't they have paid? If they're in the market for AJ Dillon, wouldn't they have given that money to Gus Edwards already to get an extension? Their projected contracts are about the same. They both are coming off similarly disappointing years. I just feel like, even though the premium paid for Derrick Henry could be prohibitive. There are indications from the reporting from ESPN and other places that like the Ravens are in the market for a big time running back. Wouldn't that be a Derrick Henry? Wouldn't that be a Tony
All
Pollard?
right.
With all due respect to AJ Dillon, I just feel like if they would have paid someone like an AJ Dillon, it would have been Gus Edwards, and they
All
didn't.
right. You've convinced me. Derrick Henry moves on, but I reserve the right to say I told you so if they sign AJ Dillon. All right, so that means that in that region we're going to have Tony Pollard against Derrick Henry with a spot in the final four on the line. Down to our edge rusher region, Emmanuel Ogba, the 1 seed, Derek Barnett, the 4 seed. Still like Ogba simply because of the comp pick formula. We're gonna keep coming back to that. I know that's not the end all be all, but when all things are equal, I think the Ravens are going to try to keep their comp picks for 2025.
Yeah, I'm fine with Ogba. It's gonna be cheap. It's not. I mean, I guess the hold up with the not really the hold up, but
Bet up.
the consideration with the comp pick is that like if you're paying him $3 million for a 1 year deal, is it even going to kind of qualify for the comp pick calculus with
True.
everything? Um, uh, all that math is so esoteric. The NFL doesn't really make it readily available for the simpletons like us to understand. But I'm fine with putting Ogba through.
Yeah, I also think there's maybe a chance just because of Barnett's age and first round pedigree that a team overpays him. Similar to
Yeah,
like the Chase Young conversation, why he's not on here, because I think that a team is going to pay him based off of that instead of his production. And teams that do that are typically not the Ravens. Like the Ravens like to
yeah.
find the market inefficiencies.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the Chase Young situation because
Sure.
PFF has him for 1 year, $15 million. That is not in the Ravens' budget, friend. The Ravens are not going to go out and give Justin Madubuike $22 million and then give Chase Young $15 million.
Yeah.
I just don't see it, barring just some uh, you know, total Cinderella run from Eric DaCosta.
Yeah, he was maybe they'll say Chase Young was in the first four or whatever they have, that those like BS Tuesday games that
Yeah,
Syracuse ended up coming out of that 1 year. I'll just bring that up. All right. 3 seed Andrew Van Ginkel and the 2 seed Shaq Barrett. Who do you like here? I think we're gonna keep rolling the dice with our guy Van Ginkel.
yeah, I like Van Ginkel, and it also allows me to make a joke in the next round about what Van Ginkel would be with a rip move. So remind me of that. All right.
All right, I'll remind you to tell a bad joke. All right. Offensive line region. We got 4 guys left. We got Greg Van Roten against Jonah Jackson, 2 guards. Jonas, I got to go with GVR. Do people call him GVR? Because I'm calling him GVR.
We do.
We do now.
GVR
GVR
from the
with the
LVR.
LVR. Yeah. All right. Is that good enough for you? Giving him a nickname to
Sure,
move him
but
on?
this is the least sexy region, so let's just get it over with.
Also, I am just botching this Photoshop file at this point. Oh boy.
This
Oh
is like
boy.
us
All right.
watching.
Let's just
This
trust
is
that
like us
GVR
watching
is
art
moving on
films.
while I figure this out. Oh no. I really should have done something better than this. All right. Jonas, keep talking about Graham Glasgow against John Feliciano while I figure this out.
Yeah,
Who do you
you
like
got
there?
triple G there with guard Graham Glasgow or John Feliciano. I guess Feliciano in this case, just because of the cost considerations. I think the average salary for Graham Glasgow is about $6.5 million a year. I think if they would have if they were willing to pay that, then they probably would have given that to Kevin Zeitler, who I think is in the market for about $7.5 million a year according to
Sure.
PFF. So we are keeping it cheap here. So I think in this case, Feliciano is the move to move forward.
All right.
If you can move
That
him forward.
that means both if I this is possible. This is why you got to watch along. All right. My 2 guys, my boys, my fellas, Greg Van Roten and John Feliciano. All right. The returning in-house guys, OBJ against Kyle Van Noy. Who do you like?
um, I guess Van Noy. I think in
Ooh.
this case, just because of the low cost, because of the need, at edge rusher, and because of the fact
Sure.
that the Ravens have already made a move at wide receiver, not a particularly sexy one, but bringing back Nelson Aguilar cut into that, wide receiver discretionary spending fund. So
Sure.
for me, I feel like it's Kyle Van Noy. I know we didn't initially have him on this top 8 list, but I think that was just because of the fact that he could be relatively cheap, could be a relatively team-friendly deal considering everything he accomplished last year. So for me, it's Kyle Van Noy as the pick to move through, but I'm willing
Yeah.
to flip a coin if you insist.
No, I wanted OBJ, but the more I think about it, the depth at wide receiver in this draft class and
And
the
every draft class moving forward.
true. And like there are a million good wide receivers now in every draft class. It's insane. But the Ravens can get somebody, I think, in the second, third, fourth round who fits that bill. And like you said, Nelson Aguilar checks the veteran box, quote unquote. So they have that. And they really lack depth on the edges. Let's be honest. I mean, they need somebody experienced, assuming they're going to lose Clowney. Speaking of Clowney, we're going to move Kyle Van Noy on. Speaking of Clowney versus Geno Stone. I think we got to go with Clowney. Geno Stone is going to be a starter on a team, right?
Yeah, I would assume so. I don't think this is a particularly deep safety class in the draft. So even though, just like what we talked about a couple of minutes ago, there's been more money shed at safety than at any position heading into free agency. Considering how many teams are relying on 3 safety looks and the fact that Geno just finished second in the NFL in receptions, I would imagine that some team would pay him to be a safety. It might not be the millions of dollars that he thought it would be, but um, I think there is a market for ball production, and Geno Stone has definitely shown that.
All right. We're down to our Elite Eight as our producers and supervisors at the band cry at the fact that we're going 52 minutes. I mean, this is just bad. The length of this podcast already, Jonas, but we got to get down to our final four. Let's go to the running back region. Tony Pollard against Derrick Henry. Who do you like?
Considering the age, considering the blocking ability, considering the receiving ability, considering the fact that he'll probably be cheaper than Derrick Henry, I think for me, Tony Pollard is the choice to go through. But if you
All
want to
right.
fight me, we can fight, Paul.
No, I mean, I that would be incongruent with the fact that I have wanted Derrick Henry to be bounced in the first round. But I think the Cinderella run ends here for Derrick Henry, and I think it's Tony Pollard. On to the final
We
four.
should say that we should say that like all of this could be the Pollard momentum could be undercut for the simple fact that maybe he wants to return to the Cowboys. A lot of reporting from Dallas reporters about how even though Tony Pollard wasn't franchised, that he still would be willing to come back to Dallas. And he obviously has that familiarity with the system. He has that relationship with Dak Prescott. There's obviously the appeal of playing in as big a market and for as popular a team as the Cowboys. So that could be certainly a carrot that Dallas has over the Ravens. But at this point, I think Pollard is probably the sensible option here.
I agree. Also, doesn't Dallas have another running back who is set to be a free agent as well? Can't remember who that is, but I promise you they do. So they're going to have to make up their minds on one of those. All right. Tony Pollard is
Rico Dowdle?
Yes, Rico Dowdle. More of a returner, I think, but still running back. All right. Tony Pollard moves on to the final four in our running back region. Now to the edge rushers. It's Emmanuel Agba versus Andrew Van Ginkel. I think we got to push the 3-seed Andrew Van Ginkel on, don't you?
Okay, let's do it.
Did you have a case for Emmanuel Agba?
No, I mean, I think just the cheapness and the fact that the comp pick wouldn't be in play here. But again, it could be a low enough money figure that it's not really an issue. But with Van Ginkel, what are we calling him if he gets a rip move, Paul? He might already have a rip move. I didn't study a lot of Andrew Van Ginkel film
What's your bad joke
from last year, but he's Rip Van Ginkel.
There it is. There it is. Didn't Rip Van Winkle fall asleep for 100 years and then wake up?
I don't know the
lore.
The lore. There's also
waiting for Marvel to
like
reboot
Poppy
that.
Van. What's
Sorry.
the bourbon? Is it Pappy Van Winkle, right?
Oh, I haven't the foggiest. It's a flavor of bourbon.
Yeah.
This sounds like an All Banner Sports
Or maybe
segment
it's
idea.
older Van. Let's get drunk and talk about Andrew Van Ginkle while we drink Pappy Van Winkle.
No, we get Andrew Van Ginkle drunk, and we do that.
Yeah, look, just look into Google right now. A 15-year Pappy Van Winkle will run you $1,400. So it's a very, very
That's easy.
expensive kind of bourbon.
You kidding me? That's easy money. All right. The offensive line for a bourbon of that quality, the offensive line, 2 guards left. My 2 guys. This is like choosing between my 2 sons, Greg Van Roten against John Feliciano. Do you have a preference here, Jonas?
I don't. Are you? I know you're Italian. Are
I am.
you Sicilian, or is it just the mainland island, the
Just the
mainland
mainland,
of
from what
Italy? Okay,
I
because
know.
Feliciano, from what I was able to ascertain, his mother is Sicilian. If that
Really?
sways you in any
That
particular direction.
sways me the opposite direction. No,
Are you a
I
self-hating Italian?
I'm self-hating, but not because I'm Italian. I think we gotta go in this instance with Greg Van Roten, only because I think that there is a good chance that the Ravens just decide to move on at guard with their young guys, with Ben Cleveland and with Salah and with draft picks and somebody who, and I think Van Roten might be a little bit cheaper because he's a little bit older and doesn't have as much name value as Feliciano, who might just go back to the 49ers because he was good for them this past year and they're a win now team. So I don't know. It's a real 51%, 49% here, but I'm going to go with GVR. I
I
don't
think I'm
think
going
you
to fight
care.
you on this.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I think because of the fact that GVR is 34 and Feliciano is 32, and Feliciano has that experience. So let's flip it. Let's flip it.
All
What are you
right.
calling?
Got to go with heads again. It's got to be right the third time. What is it? Can I see?
Heads.
Let's go. All
GVR is
right,
moving through.
GVR. You reserve the right to yell at me if John Feliciano is a Raven. All right, Greg Van Roten on to our final 4. And finally, the final Elite 8 matchup, Kyle Van Noy against Jadeveon Clowney. Jadeveon Clowney is going to cost too much money. I think it's Kyle Van Noy.
Yeah, I agree. Interesting to see, other Ravens reporters who we respect having the Ravens bringing back Clowney. I just, having done the math in that Ravens, 10-point plan for the offseason, if you sign a guy like Tony Pollard, who again is not a huge big ticket item, like, 5, 6, $7 million a year, it's really tough to see where the Ravens would have to spend, would have the money to spend more than a couple $1,000,000 a year on anyone who of substance, anyone of note. So obviously that is just like me being beholden to this idea that they would sign a Tony Pollard. I guess there's a universe in which they sign like a Jadeveon Clowney for $8-9 million a year, and they sign a Jarrett McKinnon for $3 million a year, and the math works out to be the same either way. I just think that maybe we're underselling the market for Jadeveon Clowney considering the kind of year that he had,
Yeah.
and
Former
I
pedigree,
feel
draft
like Kyle Van Noy
pedigree.
will. Yeah, I feel like Kyle Van Noy would get more than the $3.5 million that
I
Spielberger is
agree.
projecting him for, but we'll see. Well, let's move Kyle.
Jonas, we have our final 4 set, and it has more vans than the parking lot at Woodstock. We have Greg Van Roten, Andrew Van Ginkel, Kyle Van Noy, and Tony Van Pollard. It's just Tony Pollard.
Forget,
So many
is
vans. How
Van
did we
Dutch?
end up with this? I have no idea.
Is Van a Dutch surname?
I couldn't tell you. Could not tell you at all. That's wild that
Yeah, I
we
think
ended
it's
up with 3 vans.
according to Wikipedia, Van is a very common prefix in Dutch language surnames, where it is known as a tussenvogel. I guess that means maybe that means like 2
Good
vowels
thing
or
we're an
something.
explicit
I have
podcast.
no clue.
I also could have gone with like more Vans than Spencer's gifts at the mall. I don't know. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
wow.
Oh, wait. Let me back to this. A Tussin Vogelsel, which translates to between joiner, which is a fantastic English word that we should have in a Dutch name, is a family name affix position between a person's given name and the main part of their family name. So, for folks who are familiar with
Sure.
Maryland politics, that would be like Chris Van Hollen, obviously.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we're learning something about the Dutch people today.
We are. That
And there's
guarantees that.
there's two things. Should we do the Austin Powers quote? There are two things. There are two things that I hate in this world: people who are intolerant of other people's cultures, and the Dutch.
Wow. What a poll. All right. Guarantees that we're going to have a van in the championship round. Let's go with Tony Pollard against Andrew Van Ginkel. Jonas, who's moving on to the championship?
I'm torn here, Paul. Where are you leaning?
I am torn as well. I think that I would go Van Ginkel because I think they're with the glut of running backs. I just think there's a chance they sign another running back. Whereas I know there aren't as many edge rushers, and I think that there's only a few that really make sense for the Ravens. And Van Ginkel, I think, is going to be right in their price range. But at the same time, I'm not particularly like I think there's still a good chance that the Ravens sign a running back who isn't Tony Pollard. I don't think that the Ravens are set on anybody in particular at running back. I don't think they like have their heart set on Tony Pollard. I don't know.
Yeah, and we should restate what the price point is for Van Ginkel.
Yes.
According to PFF, 2 years, $16.5 million per year, so $13 million total. And to your point about just how well he was doing toward the end of last year, I have the True Media stuff pulled up. Sack rate of 8.8%, I believe, which was higher than Miles Garrett, equal with Chris Jones. His pressure rate was at 18.5%. That's right between Aiden Hutchinson and TJ Watt. So a lot of that you could say is perhaps a credit to that Dolphins coaching staff and the system from who's their defense coordinator who I'm blanking on who just left to go back to Philly.
That would be why am I totally blanking?
Pagano, right? Oh, Fangio,
Yeah.
Fangio.
Yes, Vic Fangio.
And I think there's a lot of schematic overlap between what the Ravens and the Dolphins run with their simulated pressures and creepers,
Right.
and a lot of too high. So I don't think it would be a too far a stretch to say that the kind of framework that Van Ginkel was working in could also work in Baltimore. It'd be fun to see what he could do with another year under Chuck Smith, one of the few guys in this bracket who hasn't worked with Chuck Smith. So yeah, I'm fine with saying "f you" to my own plan of the Ravens signing Tony Pollard and putting Rip not Rip Van Ginkel, Andrew Van Ginkel through.
Wow, we're gonna have a Van versus Van championship. Greg Van Roten against Kyle Van Noy. Who will meet Andrew Van Ginkel in the championship? Only because of the similarity in player. I'm gonna go or the similarity between the team and the player. The knowledge there, the experience there. I'm gonna go with Kyle Van Noy.
Yeah, that works for me.
Just a safer bet.
Again,
Yeah.
he had a huge bump in pressure rate. I think he was at like under 10% in 2022 with the Chargers, I believe, and then he jumps to about 15% with the Ravens. Again, did all that despite not having training camp, despite maybe not having a total grasp of that defensive system until pretty late. It's fair to wonder whether he could repeat that with his age advancing the way it is. But the Ravens don't necessarily need him to be an edge rusher. You think back to that game against the Rams. I think we've talked about this. Like uh, in that overtime series where the Rams start off with the ball, it is Kyle Van Noy lining up over I think the left guard. Hitting him with a 6 spin move to get just like a 2.5 second pressure on Matt Stafford and forcing him to throw the ball quicker than he would have liked. I think the wide receiver drops it or it's off target slightly. So um, even if that edge bending speed might drop off a little bit, I still think he's got enough tools in the toolkit to be a pretty good edge rusher. And that there were parts of his game this past year that we expected to see that we didn't see. Like we thought he would be more of a Tyus Bowser type, where he's dropping into coverage and being a really smart guy in space. And the Ravens, kind of had him as a more designated pass rusher, which I thought was pretty interesting and pretty surprising, but ultimately, the right thing to do. So even though there might not be a lot of tread on those tires, I think Kyle Van Noy is probably the pick in this case.
Now we have our championship matchup of Andrew Van Ginkel and Kyle Van Noy.
We stand the Vans.
We stand the Vans. I think we got to go with a new, interesting, fun name just to have a champion. It feels a little bit boring to say they're going to bring back their own guy as the champion of the free agency bracket. So I'm going to stake my claim on Andrew Van Ginkel signing with the Ravens this offseason. Who do you have, Jonas?
I'm fine with it. He's
All
we haven't
right.
talked about the hair, but the hair is good. The hair is great. We haven't even talked about the PFF grades, which are exceptional. I mean, 91.1 overall, 76.3 run defense, which is that nice little green label, 90.6 pass rush. Yeah, I mean, under age 30, he's got that Big Ten background. He can line up anywhere. I mean, you look at what he's done in his career, a lot of it as a edge rusher, over 2,000 snaps as a defensive lineman, which usually means that you're lining up on, over a tackle in this case. But he's had seasons where he's lined up in the slot for 81 total snaps, or excuse me, 56 total snaps, 81 over his career. He has had seasons where he's lined up in the box for 70 snaps, 100 snaps. So with the uncertainty about how the Ravens might replace Patrick Queen, if you are talking about a guy who on any third and long scenario could plausibly line up as an off-ball linebacker, but also plausibly line up as an edge rusher, I think it's a pretty fun, interesting signing.
Andrew Van Ginkel is the winner of our free
You are a
agency
Raven.
bracket. You are a Baltimore Raven, and Eric DaCosta, your work is done. Thank you for listening to this podcast, Eric, and you're welcome for picking who is going to be the next Ravens free agent signing. Let us know what you think, please. If we messed up, if we disregarded your favorite guy, let us know in the comments. Give us a review, give us a like, give us a thumbs up, give us a comment anywhere you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, or you're listening after the fact on any of your favorite podcast platforms. And please, of course, do subscribe to the Baltimore Banner. $1 for 6 months, which is just quite a deal, where you can read all of Jonas's great work, as well as Gian Hans, as well as Kyle Goons. Some great coverage as free agency is set to begin about 48 hours for 72 hours from now, I should say, as the legal tampering period begins on Monday, and then free agency begins in earnest on Wednesday. But that doesn't preclude the Ravens from signing anybody who has been cut already. So we may have some more news on that. I think we're going to have complete coverage, of course. I know we're going to have complete coverage on the BaltimoreBanner.com, and we'll definitely go live with any breaking news on the Banner Ravens podcast. And we'll continue to break down free agency as it begins in earnest next week. At Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle. I am at Paul Mancano and also at All Banner Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you up very, very soon.